I welcome our guest, Ramiz Yunus, political scientist from the USA, former Chief of Staff of Azerbaijan, and professor at Hazar International University. Hello, Mr. Yunus. Hello. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to see you in good health. Greetings to our entire distinguished audience. Mr. Yunus, as always, we meet every week on the platform of Channel 24. I will ask our viewers to be active, ask questions, give us likes, subscribe, share our conversation. It's important. Mr. Yunus, as you always suggest, I would also like to divide today's conversation into several tracks, blocks. It is necessary to talk about the situation around Russia, Ukraine, the United States of America, the statements of the President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev that his country should prepare for war, because, quoting him, if someone crazy comes to mind to attack, we should be ready. What he meant, I will ask you to clarify, and let's remember Russia's attacks on the infrastructure that is used and owned by the state of Azerbaijan in Ukraine. First of all, just before our conversation about 20 minutes ago, Donald Trump said at the White House that he needs 2 weeks to determine if there will be peace between Ukraine and Russia, and if there will be a meeting between Vladimir Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. How much more time does Trump need, Mr. Yunus? And how much further will he drag this process out? You explained everything perfectly long ago, and Trump doesn't understand it. He also showed a picture with Putin and invited him to the World Cup next year. If it were up to Donald Trump, he would definitely stall until the end of his cadence because it fits his tactic of creating information noise and the appearance of a process called the negotiation process. He talks about peace through force, with force existing and hanging like the sword of Damocles. But at the last moment, circumstances are such that he extends again for another 2 weeks and again extends again for another 2 weeks. As you can see, he has been successfully supporting this topic for 7 months now, from the point of view of the media around the world, who continue to play the game of the alleged negotiation process, which will supposedly lead to a concrete result tomorrow. I never tire of repeating that this will not happen for the simple reason that Ukraine and Russia have diametrically opposed positions, and an umpire which the President of the United States of America wants to play the role of, sticking to his strategy, will never be able to bring them to a compromise. And so the war will continue. In order to bring them to a compromise, he needs to move from words to deeds, but he does not and does not want to do that either with regard to Russia or Ukraine. He can't do it, given that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his team are competently conducting foreign policy in relations within the collective West and managed to get that meeting after Alaska, and if after the first scandalous meeting between President Zelensky and President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, he was alone.
Произошла вот такая встреча, и если после первой скандальной встречи президента Зеленского и президента Трампа в овальном кабинете, он был один.
Now he came there with a large group of support, and Donald Trump had to reckon with that. Therefore, in my opinion, Donald Trump lost from this meeting. All European leaders lost, and only Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky won, because it was his diplomatic victory. Sorry to interrupt, but you will continue now. You wrote an excellent article, including officially on your social networks, and called it Ukraine Saves the Honor of the West. Please explain it in more detail. I can repeat that the meeting in the Oval Office of the White House from the political, informational, and ideological point of view was important, because in the substantive plane there was no result. Just like the meeting on Alaska, there was no result on the substantive plane. In informational terms, of course, Donald Trump looked more like the loser.
В качестве проигравшей стороны больше в информационном плане, по картинке, был, конечно, Дональд Трамп.
Donald Trump lost on Alaska and lost in the White House over two warring countries, Russia and Ukraine. He won on Europe, which is gathered in his office. Notice he's sitting at his desk and they all look like members of the White House staff. Next to the Oval Office, there is a large meeting room in the White House. Those who have been to the White House know that.
Собрались у него в кабинете, и заметьте, да, он сидит за своим столом, а они все как будто сотрудники аппарата Белого дома. Там рядом с Белым домом, с его овальным кабинетом, есть большой переговорный зал в Белом доме. Да, я не знаю, вы там не были, наверное, но кто был в Белом доме, они знают.
He could have received all European leaders, presidents, prime ministers, colleagues of his level, in this large negotiating room, observing protocol. But he spoke to them in this way and humiliated them even more. They all came, and I don't mean that meeting when they were sitting around President Vladimir Zelensky, when we were shown this picture. In addition to that, there was also a meeting in his office when they were sitting around someone.
Там помимо этого еще была встреча у него в кабинете, да, когда они вокруг вот так сидели.
This is quite symbolic of the European leaders who had to go through this disgrace. They had no other options. As for that phrase, America has a population of 350 million people and a GDP of almost $30 trillion. The European Union has a GDP of about 22 and a penny trillion dollars, and Russia has about 2 and a penny trillion. So Europe's GDP is 10 times that of Russia.
Товарооборот, я имею в виду ВВП американский, почти 30 триллионов долларов. 30 триллионов долларов у американцев. ВВП у Объединенной Европы, я имею в виду, у Евросоюза, да, это порядка, где-то 22 с копейками. 22 с копейками. У России 2 с копейками. То есть у Европы в 10 раз больше, чем у России.
10 times more than Russia, and the Americans even more than Russia. Now they've all got it together. They have almost $60 trillion against a country with a GDP of about $2 trillion. Here is America with a population of 350 million and Europe with 450 million. Look at the total population and how much money they have, and they are going, not knowing what to do with an aggressor with a population of 140 million and a GDP of just over 2 trillion. They've been dragging this situation out for the last year, which is a decade. If we go specifically, it starts with 2008 year against Georgia, 2014 year, full-scale aggression. It is only thanks to Ukraine that we have seen that this topic has become a subject for discussion, not yet a subject for decision-making. The fact that they have gotten together and are moving in the direction that Ukraine and its sincere supporters need is happening very slowly. This slowness is turning into a great tragedy and great bloodshed for Ukraine. If you think back 3.5 years ago, where they were, there was a different president sitting there, Western leaders, many of whom stayed, and there were new ones, but the essence has not changed. 3.5 years ago, they were suggesting that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, get on a plane and leave. Now this same president, remaining in office, has achieved that today everyone has gathered and is forced to accept him as a subject of this war. Munich, behind the back of Ukraine, behind the back of the president of Ukraine, did not work out. That is, the president of Ukraine did not find himself in the position of the president of Czechoslovakia 80 years ago, Edward Benes, who was then forced by Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini on the one hand, and on the other hand by Edward Daladier and Neville Chamberlain to give up their territories. But this did not save Europe. This led to Winston Churchill coming to power, who played his historical role. No one has cancelled the role of personality in history. Dear Ukrainians, I recently had a polemic, and I again expressed this idea about the role of personality in history. The role of the individual in history over the years becomes especially apparent after 10 or 20 years. When the time comes, you will be able to evaluate the 35 years of your independence. I mean from 1991st year until today, until the full-scale aggression, plus 3.5 years of this aggression, and until its completion. Then you will assess the role of all Ukrainian presidents, including Volodymyr Zelensky, because if he had fled, Ukraine's existence and unity could have been at risk, potentially leading to a split and a different path. History does not like subjunctive moods, but punishes ignorance of its lessons. What history lessons did you learn? Why did this happen? Look where Ukraine is today. Today, Ukraine found itself in the White House, in the Oval Office, despite the fact that a few months before, the US president, his deputy, and the entire US team pressured Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who doesn't have trillions of dollars and doesn't have that military machine to resist, pressured to agree to the new Minsk agreements because you don't have the cards and you don't have the trump cards. If there are no trumps and no cards, why is the President of the United States meeting again with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and with such a support group? In this support group, the most experienced was the President of Finland, because his country went through the same thing that Czechoslovakia went through 80 years ago. He said a key phrase about the year 1944 and the lessons they had learned from history when the Soviet Union was forced to agree to the status of Finland, which today in history is called Finlandization. That is why the President of Finland was there when everyone is asking the question, what is the President of Finland doing there in this situation? I think in this way Europe and the entire collective West, regardless of who is sitting in the chair, has a chance to preserve honor and dignity. These values they preach, they call themselves the free world. What kind of representatives of the free world are you? I live here in the United States of America, and I am ashamed of what the former President of the United States and the current President of the United States are doing regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war. There is no concept of international law, no concept of sovereignty and territorial integrity, and I am ashamed as a US citizen. Likewise, I resent the behavior of the collective West, all the leaders of Europe, all the leaders of NATO and the European Union. I have spoken extensively on this subject regarding my homeland of Azerbaijan, my personal destiny and everything else. They betray everyone in the post-Soviet space. When the Soviet Union collapsed, we believed these values. The evil empire collapsed, and we believed that now there will be democracy, freedom of speech, territorial integrity, and human rights. So what happened? They went back to agreeing with the Kremlin. All the beautiful things they declared do not apply to us, but only to them, because they are like family members. They also took their distant relatives, such as the Baltic states, under their protection, while they left us all at the mercy of the Kremlin. It makes no difference whether Gorbachev was in jail, Yeltsin was in jail, Putin or someone else, Ivanov, Petrov, Sidorov will be in jail, because they consider it a zone of their strategic interests. Think about Lavrov's last speech and what President Donald Trump is saying, and what many European leaders, including Angela Merkel, Silvio Berlusconi, and Gerhard Schroeder, who are still influential, have said on a regular basis. Their influence has extended to the entire establishment, including information structures, intelligence, and other areas, i.e., agents of influence are at work. To this day, billions are being sent to Moscow. Economic relations are not fully finalized, and the anti-Ukrainian information machine is working powerfully both in the collective West and in the United States of America. Why does Ukraine save the honor of the West? Today it gives them a chance by its steadfastness and resistance, and they use it out of fear and a sense of self-preservation. They are gathered, they say beautiful words, But in the subject plane, there is zero. There is nothing. When Donald Trump talks about a meeting, what meeting? Who is the meeting with? Vladimir Putin is going to meet with Vladimir Zelensky. No, he will only meet with him when he is forced to. And who should force him? The West. And who is the leader in the West? The United States of America. The United States of America will do it. Look at the meeting in Alaska. Can Western leaders make it happen today? Do they have the political will? Are there Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan among them? No. Today this role, unfortunately or fortunately, is played by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But he is not the Prime Minister of Great Britain, not the President of France, not the Chancellor of Germany. He is the President of a warring country that has no military, technical, and economic leverage, let alone nuclear weapons. But there is something that has helped to pass these 3.5 years with dignity and bring everyone around the same table. The most important positive thing about this meeting is that it is reassuring and shows that Russia will not win this war again. It doesn't even have a chance. I say publicly, Russia's chance of winning this war is zero, not even 1%. Negotiations are possible only after the military phase is over. It is not by chance that I draw parallels with what happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan. 30 years ago, the war did not end. There was a frozen conflict. Then Azerbaijan lost the war. Russia punished us, supported Armenia, and froze the conflict. It was not legally formalized, i.e., we did not lose legally, but we lost de facto. Today, when we have won, it is a de jure and de facto victory. This helped us win a diplomatic victory. Today there is no such situation on earth. Russia cannot seize more than these 20%. For this year, all experts say that they have taken about 1%, putting down several 100,000 people in this year alone. 1% at a time they will advance, and the question is how many years this war will continue. Do they have the resources to do so? Reminder, the Russian Empire collapsed 3 years after the outbreak of World War II. The Soviet Union collapsed 6 years after the Afghan adventure began. From 1979 to 1985, perestroika began, and in 1991st year, the Soviet Union collapsed. It has been 3.5 years. Russia follows the Soviet and Imperial Russian patterns, but its current resources are far less than the Soviet Union's, while the West is much stronger than 35 years ago. Ukraine is no longer Afghanistan. Everyone can see that today. Russia's path, if they continue it, will lead to the collapse of the Russian Federation, unambiguously. Do you think Moscow doesn't understand this? They understand it perfectly well, because those who are stronger than Gorbachev and Yeltsin are sitting there. That is why they have been in power for 25 years. But there are processes that Moscow simply cannot stop. Of course, they were and are counting on Donald Trump and his administration, but even if Trump is very smart, he will not be able to do what is not within his competence. If he could, he would not have gathered European leaders and hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky with such a support group. Before that, he hosted him alone, and look how it all looked. Why is he doing this now? Because there are no other options, including him, because President Zelensky and his team played diplomatically very well. The Europeans are now acting in a tight bind with the Ukrainian president. If the Ukrainian president fails, the whole of Europe will fail. The European Union will fail. NATO will fail. The President of the United States doesn't need that. He has just recently agreed with them to raise contributions from 2% to 5%, and he has agreed on duties. The main thing for him, as a businessman, is money for American taxpayers. He seems to be a winner here. Ukraine is also a winner. Everything that happened in the White House is a diplomatic success of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky personally. It neutralized the information picture of Russian President Vladimir Putin's success in Alaska. For 2 days they rejoiced, but today it is leveled. In the dry balance, expect nothing from either Alaska or the meeting in Washington. The war will continue. There will be no meeting between Vladimir Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, neither the two of them nor the three of them. It will only be possible when force is shown against Russia. With regard to Ukraine, Donald Trump will not be able to show strength. He hoped to sell the situation, as he did last time in the Oval Office scandal, but he failed. Ukraine's position has strengthened many times after that, and first of all, the meeting in Washington is a clear confirmation of this. So the question arises, when will he show this strength? He will not show it in the near future, at least not for the next 2 weeks, because during this time, Russian President Vladimir Putin will fly to China and return. I think that was the main thing that US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin talked about in Alaska. Trump must have outlined his red lines and outlined the goal and the task that he needs. The Russian president found himself in this situation. These two titans have yet to directly go to war. Note that sanctions have been imposed against India, but they seem to have reached an agreement with China, and China is satisfied. They are not going for direct confrontation. They are preparing for a future battle. In this future battle, Russia is going to use itself so as to retain power and come out of the war with dignity. The situation in which Russian President Vladimir Putin and his team find themselves today is as follows. He is stuck in this war and cannot get off the hook. Only US President Donald Trump or the leader of China can help him. The EU will not help him in this matter. He is completely in tandem with Ukraine. We are witnesses to this game. The topic of negotiations has been regularly raised since Donald Trump came to power, and this bogey will continue to be discussed, but the war will continue. It is very important to participate in parallel in this whole game, because it is a game. In parallel, it is very important to solve specific tasks on the ground. Specific tasks are the military technical supply of Ukraine, everything that covers the sky, everything that shoots very far away, and so on. Today, the whole agenda of the Russian-Ukrainian war will be solved only on the ground. Someone can negotiate in offices, but the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, I tell you publicly and repeatedly, decides these issues directly. I do not think that the current president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, can be forced by anyone in the world today to violate the constitution of Ukraine. He did not give up the airplane. He went through 3.5 years of war, and today he has the support of the armed forces, the entire Ukrainian society, and the international community. He succeeded in the Oval Office at the last meeting in Washington with such a support group not to agree to delusions that come from the Kremlin. Absolutely. It is a long process, and you will have to stay in this process for a long time, because the war will continue. I think it will definitely continue for the whole of this year, because everything that concerns the negotiations will be decided by the military. If we want to accelerate the negotiations, Ukraine has to increase its successes on the battlefield. Thank you very much, Mr. Yunus. You have set all the accents, everything is very clear. We can move on to the next block, the Caucasus, the South Caucasus, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. In previous conversations, Mr. Yunus, I thought that Azerbaijan and Armenia are close to a peace agreement. It seems to be, but the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, says that his state needs to prepare for war. Explain who to fight with, how to fight, and why prepare for war if there is a peace agreement with Armenia. What should we understand here? Everything that we hear today and will hear in the context of peace Talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia should be viewed through the prism of global geopolitical processes, and not only through the prism of the Russian-Ukrainian war. The Russian-Ukrainian war is an important process, a tragedy that will determine the future world order. Given that the South Caucasus is close geographically, it will definitely affect the region and the geopolitical situation in the South Caucasus.
А учитывая, что это географически очень близко к Южному Кавказу, это однозначно будет иметь свое влияние и на Южный Кавказ, и на геополитическую ситуацию на Южном Кавказе в том числе.
What happened in Washington? Briefly, it was a geopolitical defeat for Russia. It happened in the Oval Office of the White House in the presence of US President Donald Trump, not in the Kremlin and not in the presence of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Armenia and Azerbaijan and the leaders of these countries shake hands in the presence of the US President and declare that they have fully agreed. The Prime Minister of Armenia openly says, "I fully agree with President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan." Armenia accepts all of Azerbaijan's conditions that it can accept today, including the elimination of the OSCE Minsk group. The initialing of the 17 points of the peace treaty leaves only the opening of the Zangezur corridor, and this opening will be different from what was written in the 9th point of the 20th year agreement in November, which stipulated that the opening of the Zangezur corridor would be under the protection of Russian FSB border guards. This paragraph has also been deleted. There will be an American flag and an American-Armenian company at the entrance and exit. Azerbaijan will be provided with unimpeded access both by rail and road. Azerbaijani citizens will be able to freely pass these 44 kilometers from the main part of Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan. The commercial part of this project, while preserving the sovereignty of Armenia and all the interests and requirements of Azerbaijan, will be carried out by the said company. This could not but cause anger in Moscow, but Moscow has few levers of influence on Azerbaijan. Militarily and technically, they cannot influence because the Azerbaijani army is 100% NATO army, 200,000 NATO army. We have the Shusha Declaration. This is not NATO's 5th article, which to this day is unknown how it works. In all the years of NATO's existence, it has only been officially invoked once, on September 11, 2001. Who used it? The United States of America to initiate action against Iraq and Afghanistan. But how does it work? It's a commitment, but it's not like the Shusha Declaration. You pick up the phone, you inform, and immediately either a 1 million-strong Turkish army defends Azerbaijan, or a 200,000-strong army comes to the aid of the Turkish people. That's what 24 hours is. We have that. Next door is nuclear Pakistan, a strategic partner with one of the world's strongest air forces, recently demonstrated capabilities in clashes. They have nuclear weapons. I am not talking about military technical cooperation at the highest level with Israel. In such a situation, only military technical and political measures affect Russia. Russia does not affect Azerbaijan in any way. There is no longer a problem called Karabakh on the territory of Azerbaijan. There is not a single Russian soldier. Everything has been cleaned up. Azerbaijan and its army stand on the conditional border with Armenia. Armenia has accepted all of Azerbaijan's conditions. This is enshrined in the office of the President of the United States of America. Everyone will have to reckon with it. The West has recognized publicly, through the mouth of the US President in his office, that the Karabakh issue is closed. Azerbaijan has put a final end to it. Only legal formalization remains. Legal formalization includes parliamentary elections in Armenia next year and a referendum on changing the constitution. Changing the constitution, in addition to the demands that Pashinyan himself wants to change in Armenia, implies a revolution to move the country from a mythical Armenia to a modern, creative Armenia. Therefore, the constitution, including the concept of the state, needs to be changed. We are interested first of all in what is stated in the preamble of the current constitution, where it is clearly written that Karabakh is the territory of Armenia. This record has existed for 35 years. Azerbaijan wants to remove this legal phrase. They seem to be moving towards this, but processes have already started inside Armenia. First of all those who have been obstructing this for 35 years, and this is not only Russia, but also many representatives of the West, who did not want a peace treaty for 35 years and profited well from it. In this regard, the president of Azerbaijan issued a warning. And not only to them, because, as we know, apart from Armenia itself, both the Kremlin and Tehran reacted quite negatively to the fact of signing the agreements in Washington. Therefore, everything that the president of Azerbaijan said is first of all a message to the Armenian society. If you want peace, we are ready. If you want war, we are also ready. The referendum on changing the constitution is an answer to the question, do you want peace with Azerbaijan or war? The parliamentary elections are the same, because Pashinyan has stepped over something that no Armenian leader has ever stepped over before. Moreover, this is the same Nikol Pashinyan, who in 2018, after coming to power, after a certain period of time went to Karabakh and declared that Karabakh is Armenia, and that's it. Later he publicly retracted this and admitted his mistake, but he did it not from a good life, but after he received a serious blow during the 40-day war. He frankly admitted it today, addressing the nation after returning from Washington. There remains a lot of resistance in Armenia, and from Russia and Tehran. In Tehran, for example, there are also two positions. Some radicals who are closer to the spiritual leader are the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and there are those who support Nikol Pashinyan. Pashinyan visited Armenia the other day and expressed his support. There was a certain concern about the Zangezur corridor, but it was explained to him that Iran's interests will also be taken into account. Therefore, it is not by chance that I said in public that when they talk about Trump's bridge, it is not only a figurative phrase, it can also be in a literal sense. This bridge will carry railroads, roads, and many other things. The border between Armenia and Iran can continue to function as it has been functioning. It is important for Azerbaijan that the main part of the country is connected to Nakhichevan and unimpeded passage is ensured. Now these are technical issues. Everything that had to be done for this politically has been done. We see resistance. The president of Azerbaijan says exactly that. You know how Azerbaijan's relations with Russia have deteriorated recently. Given that no country was named when the president of Azerbaijan said that we do not want war, but we must be ready every day, because we see the processes around us. The Russian-Ukrainian war is not over yet. Not everyone in the world is happy about what happened in the Oval Office between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the United States of America. We have to be ready. We must be ready for peace, but at every moment we are ready for war, for the forces that want revanchism inside Armenia, and those who push them to do so outside Armenia, and for those in the north and in the south who also disagree with the new status of the Karabakh Military Administrative District. Given Azerbaijan's deteriorating relations with Russia, we should be prepared for provocations from both the north and the south. The statement of the president of Azerbaijan should be considered in this context, because Azerbaijan is not looking for confrontation with Russia. Azerbaijan is responding on the mirror level, and this has certain results. Today there was information that for the first time this year, and last year it was in August, an intergovernmental commission was held in Astrakhan at the level of Deputy Prime Ministers Havryshchak and Shahin Mustafayev, Deputy Prime Minister of Azerbaijan. The Intergovernmental Commission between Azerbaijan and the Interdepartmental Economic Commission met in Astrakhan. It solves purely economic issues, but the very fact of this meeting means that the Kremlin Tower, which works to improve relations and relieve tensions, went to this meeting. At the same time, we know other towers that have already bombed Azerbaijan's economic interests in Ukraine twice. Despite the fact that after the first time the Azerbaijani president allocated 2 million, the Azerbaijani media and the information field began to actively discuss the topic that Azerbaijan may lift the embargo on military arms supplies to Ukraine. Azerbaijan has enough tanks and old Soviet planes modernized with modern stuffing, and it can reconsider this embargo. Despite this, a second bombing took place. At the same time today, Russian President Vladimir Putin publicly sent a congratulatory telegram to the First Lady of Azerbaijan, the first Vice President, the wife of the current president, on her birthday. I mean, imagine it says, say a big hello to your spouse. There's a meeting and at the same time there's a bombing. We should see what they talk about. This meeting took place today. Before that, Havryshchak, governor of Astrakhan, and other officials laid flowers at the monument of Ihor Aliyev, the late president of Azerbaijan. There is positivity in the information field, in parallel with a huge amount of negativity.
То есть, значит, идет какой-то позитив, да, в информационном поле. И это все параллельно с огромным количеством негатива.
That is, as it is now fashionable to say, two towers of the Kremlin, one for the positive, the other for the power bloc, working for the negative. This is regulated at the highest level. There is a game going on, in which we also take part, because nothing is said at the level of top officials, but just below that, these two directions are taking place. There are mirror answers there and there. Let's see what will be agreed upon at this intergovernmental meeting, because no economic issues can be resolved there, but they can meet. But political issues will certainly be discussed there, including certain messages to each other about how to build relations further, to go down the path of confrontation, or to ease tension. Everything started with the tragedy with the Azerbaijani airplane. Azerbaijan will not take a step back in this issue, because the truth is on the side of Azerbaijan. The whole world knows it. The Azerbaijani civilian plane was shot down on the approach to Grozny by a Russian military missile, and Russia is obliged to apologize, pay compensation, and punish those responsible. If this does not happen, Azerbaijan will appeal to international structures to punish Russia.
Если они на это не пойдут, Азербайджан будет идти дальше международной структуры для того, чтобы наказать Россию в этом вопросе.
They can always stop this process. The second question concerns the nightmare that is now being organized with regard to the Azerbaijani diaspora. The team went all over Russia, all provinces, studied all businesses of Azerbaijanis, and took them under control to start pressure. Azerbaijan will naturally react in a mirror way, although we do not have such a large number of Russian citizens with businesses in Azerbaijan. After the incident with the civilian airplane, we shut down Sputnik, Rosotrudnichestvo, and everything else. We continue to mirror everything they do. If it goes down the path of confrontation, it will do nothing good for Russia, because Russia will not be able to put pressure on Azerbaijan today, as it was able to do 35 years ago after the First Karabakh War, because the situation has completely changed. Azerbaijan is different, the status quo is different, the geopolitical situation is different. Therefore, we can assume with great fear that in addition to the tension in Azerbaijani-Russian relations, we will witness a great tension in Russian-Armenian relations, because it is there that Russia has the strongest positions today. Unlike Azerbaijan, Russia has a great military technical influence on Armenia, a base in Gyumri, an air base in Yerevan near Yerevan, border guards. The borders with Iran and Turkey are guarded by these border guards. Russian business is in full control of the process. Bypassing sanctions brings huge money to Armenia's budget. Armenia's presence in the CSTO and the Eurasian Union makes Prime Minister Pashinyan's position vulnerable, but despite this, he managed to hold on and bring the topic of peace talks to an agreement that reached the White House. We will see how events will develop. I do not rule out a forceful attempt to change the power in Armenia, as it happened in 1999, when there was a shootout in the parliament and Robert Kosharian, a protege of Moscow, came to power. I do not rule out any option that the Kremlin may take. Today we see what the Kremlin is doing to the notion of international law on the Russian-Ukrainian front, and in the post-Soviet space as a whole. We see the imperial hysteria and grin that is demonstrated in all media in Russia. We will closely follow what will happen in Armenia on the eve of the parliamentary elections, because they are crucial. If Nikol Pashinyan starts the procedure of withdrawal of Russian troops from Gyumri in the near future, relevant topics will be raised and further steps will be taken. We will see a parallel squeezing of Russia out of Armenia. After the signing of what happened in Washington, anti-Russian sentiments in Armenia have become even stronger. Pro-Western sentiments have once again intensified. And this is exactly what Pashinyan can play on. At the same time, the president of Azerbaijan clearly says, if you want war, we are ready for it. But this war will not take place on the territory of Azerbaijan, because there are no more points on the territory of Azerbaijan on which you could rely. It can take place on your territory. Are you ready for it? Who will fight for you? This is exactly the warning to the Armenian society. I perceive it this way. The president of Azerbaijan is addressing Armenians. If you want to fight, we are ready. If you want peace, we are ready for peace too. You just decide for yourself which of Armenia's political leaders is closer to you. The one who advocates a pro-Russian direction, the continuation of confrontation with Azerbaijan and war with Azerbaijan, or the one who wants to change this history, who publicly addresses you and says, let's make peace with Azerbaijan, and in parallel with Turkey, getting out of the deadlock we are in, and getting involved in all integration processes. So I take it as a program speech of the president of Azerbaijan, which coincides with the parallel speech of the Prime Minister of Armenia. As far as I understand, today both the government of Azerbaijan and the government of Armenia, which signed this important document at the level of leaders in the White House, are synchronously working both for the internal audience and for the external audience, because the main problem today is inside Armenia. But in addition, there are serious problems around the region, and Armenia alone will not be able to cope. Azerbaijan alone will not be able to cope. Therefore, we are in favor of the fact that once the document is signed, it should be strengthened and move in that direction. This process is not as easy as many people think. They signed it. Donald Trump came and said, I've done everything. Give me the Nobel Peace Prize. And that's it. No, my dears, this is absolutely not true. The situation can change overnight, because the Russian-Ukrainian war has been going on for 3.5 years, and apart from statements, all Western leaders cannot do anything so far. Azerbaijan won this conflict despite almost 30 years of confrontation in the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflict. We have achieved this despite all obstacles, and now we continue to move towards peace talks with Armenia, despite the huge number of countries, political institutions, politicians, economic interests that oppose this. They categorically don't want to because it's a tidbit, it's logistics and more. Look at what happened during the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. A historical map showed that Iran's airspace was closed, air traffic with Russia was cut off. The small isthmus from the Caspian Sea to the Black Sea through Baku and Tbilisi was used for airplane flights. Imagine the importance of this logistics in economic and political terms, in the geopolitical turbulence and confrontation that awaits the entire world, including the US and China, which have not yet directly clashed, but are moving in that direction. We see that Central Asia is getting involved, Europe is getting involved, everybody else wants to be involved. It's a tidbit. Some want peace, others do not want peace in this situation. So not everything is decided today from Azerbaijan and Armenia. The president of Azerbaijan says, "We must always be ready for war, for any war that may come from neighboring Armenia, from the north, from the south, or from anywhere else. We must be ready for it." Well, we are not looking for war in parallel. We should be ready for peace and move towards peace. These two processes seem to be going on in parallel today, and this message is very important. This message is not only for the Azerbaijani audience, I think it is for everyone who is against the peace agreement. Sir, thank you very much for describing in a full picture what is happening, where the process is moving, how to look at, and how to perceive these or those events. Thank you again for the broadcast. I hope to see you again next Thursday. Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye. Glory to Ukraine.
Очередной раз спасибо за этот эфир. Я очень надеюсь, что в следующий четверг уже мы тоже с вами увидимся.
Glory to the heroes. I remind you that Ramiz Yunus, a political scientist from the United States of America, was with you. Be sure to subscribe, comment, share our conversation. It's important to understand and see how all geopolitical processes are going on. My name is Ihor Havryshchak. We will see you on the air of Channel 24.